Today we're going to compare the GodHands Nippers with a normal pair, and I see too many reviewers online incorrectly using the GodHands Nippers and cutting runners straight off. That is a mistake. We're also going to have a look at other colors because there is an impact depending on what color runner you use, and finally have a look at clear parts and why you shouldn't use them on it. Okay, so we're going to compare the GodHands Nippers with the PN125. It is 5 times the price of that other nipper. So let's see, is it really worth that increase in price? First, let's explain what the difference is. So a normal pair of nippers, they're kind of 2 blades, so they will push the plastic and that kind of warps it, potentially creating that white stuff. The GodHands nippers on the other side, they're single bladed. So essentially one side is sharp like a knife and the other side is flat. So when it cuts, it's more like a slicing effect. One thing I did notice is that the marketing by Bandai, that looks overly good. So let's see what it looks like in real life. Here is a look at the cheap one. As you can see, it is kind of accurate to the pictures, it's super white. But what about the GodHands? If you have a look now, it cuts butter smooth, but it does leave some sort of residue. Now this is the biggest mistake I've seen of most reviewers. They just use the GodHands and cut it straight off the runner. Man, this is not ideal because the sides, they kind of apply pressure, so they will be warping no matter what. As you can see, it leaves quite a significant nub as it would if it was the cheap one as well. And this is an example of one where there's high pressure applied to the plastic and I cut it straight off the runner. It's very bad. So the correct technique that's in the guides is to do 2-cut method. So first use the cheap one to cut it off the runner and then use the GodHands to trim it down. As you can see, it is quite a tedious process. It will take double the amount of time, but the result, it should be nicer. One thing to mention also is that you can't just stop here. If you want the true best effect, you need to use a modeler's knife to cut it down because the GodHands sometimes can't reach to the flat level. And then afterwards, if you want to cover up some of the colors like the grays, just use a pencil and then color it in. As you can see, after the processing, it looks perfectly fine. Consider also the fact that these are inner frame parts, you wouldn't be able to see them anyway. What would it look like though if you didn't have the GodHands nippers? Would that actually add extra effort? So what I'm doing here is showing you what I did if I didn't have the GodHands nippers. I also had a glass vial because this can smooth things down as well. And as you can see, the final result, you can't really tell that I used the GodHands or not. What I also did was I timed it against white plastic. So white is probably one of the ones where the GodHands makes the least amount of impact because even if it warps, it's the same color anyway. As you can see the process, I love to use the modeler's knife. GodHands and modeler's knife, I actually prefer the modeler's knife if I had a choice between the two only because it can get to more fine detail. As you can see, this piece, it took me around 2 minutes to do. Now let's see what it's like if I have the GodHands nippers as part of the cleaning process. As you can see, the stages are pretty much exactly the same. I say I'm a more particular type of guy. I would use a modeler's knife just to make it perfect. But if you're lazy, I think you can get away with the GodHands nippers just cutting it off and not using the knife. So in terms of time, it definitely does save some time in the cleaning process. The final product though, on white, barely can tell any difference. It looks exactly the same. So the question you might ask is, what's the point of the GodHands nippers? Here is the reason why. Colored parts. Remember I mentioned about the warping? Well, the warping on the white is most noticeable on the reds and the blues, for example, on this kit. So let me just demonstrate to you how it would look on the red parts in particular. So what I did was just take the spare piece of runner and just have a look at how difficult it is to cut it off with the normal nippers. The part just flicks off the end. You can see how much pressure it applies and there's definitely going to be warping there. And the GodHands nippers, look how smooth it cuts. And then if you look at the cross section, it becomes super obvious that the normal nippers on the left side, they create white warping, and this is a pain if it's on the outside of a kit. You can notice that immediately. The GodHands nippers is clean on the right though. So on the PG Unleashed Core Fighter, I used the normal nippers and you can see I had to color in a different color of blue because those were super white. It just pulled the plastic out. The nub placement is horrible on that part. And then finally, clear parts. Never use the GodHands nippers on clear parts. That's an instant way to break it. The reason is because the clear parts are super hard and pretty much the knobs, you wouldn't be able to see them normally anyway, so just use the normal nippers for those. That is a big tip if you want to conserve the life of your GodHands nippers if you ever buy them. And then finally, I want to talk about the fact that Nub placement on most of the new Bandai kits, you can barely tell. I made this whole MG Barbatos without the GodHand nippers, and seriously guys, if you look this close, can you even see where the nubs are? I'm going to give you a few seconds to have a look, just to show you that you may not need the GodHand nippers. So those are where the nubs are, where you can see most obviously. In my opinion, do you really need expensive GodHand nippers to make a difference? Probably not. You can spend that money on other things like modelers, knives, glass files, sanding sticks, and you can pretty much achieve the same effect. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to give a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you guys later. Peace.